You should be good, Craig.
All right, everybody hear me? Good?
Yep.
All right, awesome. I want to say welcome and thank you to Shiawassee Economic Development Partnership for helping us put this on. We've been looking forward to getting out and providing more community training. Go through, introduce ourselves to you. So, who we are, we're Adaptive Technology Solutions. Our goal is to be a strategic IT partner for businesses in the area. And our mission is to bridge the technology gap between your businesses and the technology you need for it to thrive. So what sets us apart? We look at everybody as a partner, not just a vendor. We want to make sure that we are providing IT support, but we also want to know what's making your business tick. What different things are you trying to integrate, and see what we can do to grease those wheels for you. Provide strategic guidance, and our big goal is to solve the IT complexities that you are facing. So my name is Thomas Wendling. I'm the managing partner of Adaptive Technology Solutions, and I have Craig Pontius, who's our director of operations. Going over for today, our agenda. I'm going to go through a quick recap of session 1. So during session 1, we defined artificial intelligence. We kind of went over some of the differences between machine learning and generative AI, which is what we're going over today. Everything based around the large language models. As we all know, ChatGPT, Claude from Anthropic, Grok from XAI. And I want to apologize in advance that this is going to be the driest session that we have. We are talking about security. We are talking about policy. Nobody wants to, but it's very important, especially as we're talking about transmitting information into a larger model. So what are we going to be going over? We're going to be going over data security and how that affects small businesses, practical data governance, AI ethics, providing effective training for your staff, setting appropriate boundaries, smart training approaches, and setting the foundation for an AI policy. So when we talk about security as a whole, everything goes back to policies. Same thing with human resources. If you don't have a policy defined, you can't enforce. You can't enforce anything for security if you don't have a policy. And you can't enforce anything for your employees around AI if you don't have a policy defining what you can and cannot do. So with that, we'll dive into data security for the small business owner. So what we need to do is go over how AI tools process your data. So everybody who has used ChatGPT, Claude, especially the versions that are free. Sure, we've all heard the phrase, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Even today, we have lunch here. We are providing all of this with SEDP on your behalf. Ideally, what we're going to get out of it is contacts in the community. Ideally, it might lead to some business, but we also want to educate. When you are using ChatGPT, you're using Claude, and you're providing data to the free models, buried in the end user license agreement that you agree to before you start the service is verbiage around the fact that they are going to use some of this data to make the AI model better. So they are going to train on that data. So what does that mean? As you're going through, if you provided privileged information, personally identifiable information, that data could make its way into the larger model. One of the things that I love to do, especially as I'm doing things with SEDP, when you guys open up one of these AI models that you're working with, ask it, who is Justin Horvath of Owasso, Michigan? And it will provide data and links all across who Justin is, his office cell phone number. There have been some guardrails put in place because 6 months ago, it would provide his cell phone number because it's been published a bunch of different places. So this is all public data that has been programmed into parameters for the AI model. Where was that data where was that data found? It was found open on the internet, on the SEDP's website, or from the larger Michigan Economic Development Corp, social media, places that it was open and able to be found. So we always want to make sure whatever software we're using, free, paid, whatever, we want to make sure that we're reviewing those terms of service. Working with a community college not too long ago, Oracle is a rather nasty word in our business. Their licensing models are rather draconian. So there was one system that was in the process of being retired for a community college, and it needed to have the Oracle Java runtime environment installed on it, which lots of people here have that installed for one reason or another. It's usually packaged with another piece of software. Well, Oracle performs audits. And what they found was there was one instance installed throughout the entire campus. And so they had to license 1,200 knowledge workers. That's their full-time staff that would inevitably be using that system for Oracle licensing at $179 per user per year. Now, when we talk about community colleges, that's kind of a drop in the bucket for their revenue, but it was unplanned. And so buried in the terms of service was a line item that said, if you use this, you have to license all of your employees. And I got this. So moving on, when we're talking about data, we want to know our risk levels. So low risk, anything that is public knowledge, ads, general website information, anything that people freely put out on the internet. Move into medium risk. This is where we'll run into sensitive financial information, trade secrets. I see some people from manufacturing and that kind of stuff here. The ways that you guys will handle certain things, for pipe threaders that are wire yours better than the others. There might be privileged information. So we don't necessarily want to feed that back into an AI model where a competitor could be looking like, how can I make this better? Oh, well, how about doing this? Once it's out there, it's no longer privileged. And then we go into high risk information. So this is anything that's regulated. So customer privileged, personally identifiable information, health records, payment data. Anybody in the room, how many of you guys accept credit cards for different parts of your business? How many of you guys are PCI compliant? Awesome. For those of you that haven't heard of PCI compliance, you are required to store cardholder data in a way that is secure, that has access that is auditable, and that you provide security awareness training to all of your employees, especially the ones that are touching cardholder data. And that's whether you're using QuickBooks Online to accept credit cards, even though you're not storing that information, you are processing card payments, so you fall under PCI compliance. Which piece?
The part that makes you compliant. What part makes it compliant?
So to be PCI compliant, there's 4 levels. Most people fall under level 4, which is the minimum one. You need to be providing security awareness training to all of your employees, especially the ones that are using cardholder information. You need to have security processes in place on how to report a breach if something happens. You also have to have minimum security standards in place. Usually you have to have antivirus, endpoint detection and response, spam filtering, 2-factor authentication, all that. And if you are found that you have self-certified in the event that you're level 4, which is literally a self-certification, that you don't process more than like 10,000 transactions in a year, your cyber liability policy will not cover you because you have certified to your cybersecurity insurance company that you are meeting certain levels of protection. If you're going through those questionnaires and you are looking and you see questions, you're like, well, yeah, I'm doing this, but if you can't answer in a binary way, yes or no, then you have to answer no. Because in the event that a breach happens, and we're no longer talking about more of an if, it's a when. They will look at your policy and they'll say, well, you certified that you had this level of security. We found that the breach happened because there was a miss here. they do not have to pay out. So as much as you guys are paying premiums, if you self-certify, if you say you have something and you don't, you really need to go back through and make sure that you are meeting those. We are happy to talk more in depth about cybersecurity in general. It's something we are very passionate about, but I don't want to derail everything today because I could wax poetic the way Craig can wax poetic about AI in general. So, no problem. All right. So, moving on a little bit. So, protection strategies. How do we go through and protect ourselves? We always make sure that we're reviewing the terms of service. We're always making sure that whatever platforms we're using, we are minimizing data retention. So, I see a lot of different people here. Do you guys have a data retention policy for your organizations? Cool. Now, that data retention policy, if you guys are legally regulated to hold documents for certain periods of time, there's the largest hospital system in the state I've done work for in the past, and they have a data retention policy for their chat messages and stuff that is shared through Microsoft Teams. After 90 days is gone. Now, why is that? If you guys keep it, and you don't have to in the event that there is some sort of lawsuit, it is discoverable. You have to provide that in the event of a lawsuit. So if the organization has a policy that says we're only keeping data, this type of data, for 90 days because we don't have a requirement to keep it longer, it falls off, you no longer have it, it's not going to be part of a lawsuit. And it's a protection for them and a protection you guys should consider for yourselves. You can keep data forever, but should you? And as we look at privacy settings, every time that you guys buy a new computer, Edge pops up, do you want to send data to Microsoft? No, I really don't. Why do they need to have all of this extra tracking information about me? Or I sign in to Adobe, or I sign into any of the other platforms you guys use on a daily basis. There's stuff that they will take. They'll use it in their marketing materials to try and provide better targeted marketing. I always check now. They don't need to have all of that enhanced knowledge about me. I will provide them what I need to at a minimum to use the product and move on. I always make sure that I am safeguarding my data and making sure that everything is kept to that minimum data retention. So stricter controls as risk level increases. So we've talked about low, medium, and high risk on the last slide. As that risk goes up, there needs to be stricter controls. Most EMR platforms, that's electronic medical records, as an administrator in a system of that type, I can go and I can access anything, and that's for diagnostic purposes. However, there are safeguards in place that if I go and look at that data, I need to provide a reason why I am pulling that up. Or if you're a nurse and you're not working on an active patient, if it's not part of your patient care, they're working under a different provider, you generally have to provide the reasoning for why you're looking at that patient data. And all of that audit trail is logged. In the event that something happens, there is a misuse of information or a data breach, how did that happen in that entire chain of events? And so when we're talking about sales data, we go back to that medium risk. You guys can get data from other companies. There are websites out there that sell that kind of stuff. And it makes sense to kind of look at it and compare. And you can use AI to do that, but you want to make sure you're doing it in a way that personally identifiable information is sanitized. So we're looking strictly at numbers. We're looking at dates. We're looking at the things that have minimal risk. And then ideally we'll use data anonymization and masking, like I just talked about. We will sanitize things to make sure that we're not training that larger model or sending out data that we generally have at that higher risk level. In session one, Craig talked about the co-pilot problem. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. So everybody here who uses Microsoft 365, I know that they have been seeing, hey, enable co-pilot in your organization. And it will start learning things about you. It'll start learning things about your email usage. It'll start learning things about your contacts. Now, there is a higher tier of Copilot licensing, and when you pay for that and enable that, Copilot will index, and so it'll scan every one of your Microsoft 365 files by default. And if you don't have your permissions set up correctly, that means that users may be able to see confidential information, and the AI tools can bypass traditional controls and logging. And I'll show you an example of that here shortly. So how do we get around that if we want to use Copilot? Strict permissions and controls. We have to conduct regular audits, and we need to consider what data we're storing in Microsoft 365. So for organizations that are cloud native, they don't have on-site server infrastructure, or they're not using other cloud services for data files and that kind of stuff. Should you store HR data in Microsoft 365? You can, as long as the proper controls are in place. But should you store patient information in SharePoint or OneDrive? Now we're starting to get into spots where the risk is higher. Why are we taking that out of the EMR? Most electronic medical record platforms have patient access portals, and they have the ability to send data securely through the HL7 interfaces to different providers and all of that. So should we take that data and put it into a spot where it can be indexed? Generally, we don't want to do that. So for a good example of data anonymization, we put this one together. We prompted the AI, generate a professional email from the HR department, use this to data, name, salary, social security number. And yes, this is kind of a blatantly obvious example. You shouldn't really transmit a social security number, but it really gets the point across. So how do we do this safely? So we tell it to generate a professional email, new employee, name, salary, social security number, and we'll use placeholders for the information. That way we're not training that AI model. If an email doesn't leave your internal system, it is secured in transit. It doesn't go across the internet. And even if it does, we're talking like Microsoft 365 services where it's being transported between multiple Microsoft servers. That is all encrypted in transit and doesn't leave that cloud. So even though, should we be sending emails with social security numbers? Probably not. We have other ways of identifying people. If it's staying within the same system, you're generally okay. What I would do is make sure that if you have the proper licensing for it, again, talking Microsoft 365, enable the flags for encryption and do not forward, so that way it can't be forwarded outside of the organization. All right, so we talked about Copilot. Let's take a look at how this happens. So Copilot has been let loose in an organization with minimal security controls. Now, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to have a bunch of QR codes for you guys to take a look at, and they're going to tie back to things that we're talking about. So this was released on May 7th, outlining Copilot security issues and how a red team, which is a penetration tester who is trying to work as a bad actor to gain data, is using Copilot to get around access. So what you're seeing here is the chat. He has said, hey, I'm looking for data that has passwords and that kind of stuff in it. And Copilot will respond, as you see kind of down there at the bottom, the name of the file, who it was authored by, last modified on. But when he gets the link earlier, he clicks on it, he doesn't have access to that. He goes, okay. So my next step is, I'm going to trick the AI into providing me this information. If I trick the AI into providing me the information, it's going to display it here in clear text, like you see right there. Hey, I'm looking for this information. I can't put it on my screen because it's so small. Please provide it. And it goes through, and it provides you all of that privileged information. So one, we shouldn't be storing usernames and passwords in SharePoint, OneDrive, ideally. It is the first place that I would go look if I was doing a penetration test. If I can gain access, I can own it. Now, this highlights where if the access controls are not set up for Copilot, it's still going to be able to provide that information. It doesn't matter who you are in the organization, as long as you have the minimal bits of information, like the file name, the SharePoint library, and then I can also take it a step further and use some social engineering. If I have gained access, I can reach out to this person's manager and say, hey, hey, I'm looking for this file, so-and-so said I could get a copy of it. And people are generally trying to be helpful. And there's a good chance that his manager, if they haven't had security awareness training to understand that I might be a bad actor, they're going to possibly send me over that file because I have enough information to make myself seem legitimate. So, again, I'm not saying people should not use Copilot. They just need to be aware of the implications if the security is not set up properly. So, practical data governance. How do we govern our data properly, whether it's in AI world or whether it's without using AI? The organization should choose a data champion. They don't need to be technical. What they do need to do is have a good understanding of the data that's in your organization. They need to have an understanding of the regulatory requirements you guys have, and an understanding of where the data is stored. Doesn't necessarily have to be the hows. That's where they reach out to their IT team, or in the case of people that use managed service providers like us, they reach out to us and say, hey, how is my data being stored? Where is it being stored? What are the permissions? Document where your sensitive data lives. If you're putting HR information in SharePoint, financial information, any kind of privileged information, make sure that you're noting it and you note how the access is granted. If it's an on-prem infrastructure, using Microsoft Active Directory, we can control it with a group. We can also get real nitty-gritty and start doing some item-level targeting. That gets into a whole nother discussion. If we're using Google Drive through Google Workspace, we can govern things with groups again as well. And we can start building out structures that we can't interact with the file except through Google Workspace. So we can't download it, we can't put it into an external editor. We can put those kinds of things in place. And the same thing with Microsoft 365. We can govern that with groups through Azure Active Directory, and we can make sure that things are secured. And then, as we've been talking and what we talk with all of our customers and partners, security is a journey. It's not a destination. It's ever evolving. And people need to understand that reviews need to be conducted regularly. So as people are onboarded, as people are let go from the organization, as roles change, we need to make sure that they have the permissions they need to do their job. And if they no longer need those permissions, they need to be revoked. And all of this revolves around a security principle called zero trust. And the first thing that we learn with zero trust is before we trust somebody, we verify who they are. So for any of you guys that are using cloud infrastructure, we want to make sure that you have two-factor authentication enabled everywhere. As much of an inconvenience as it is, it needs to be there. The next step is we start looking into conditional access policies. So if you're trying to access sensitive data and it's in Microsoft 365, we can build out conditional access policies that say you have to be on a Microsoft 365 joined machine. You have to be this user, and you have to go through your authentication process before you can proceed, or that your authentication has been processed within the last 12 hours. And then we can even start locking it down even more by the internet service provider you're going, because a lot of people have static IPs, and we can start making that conditional access even tighter. So moving on to AI ethics. We have 4 main tenets with this. Transparency, always tell people that you're using AI. We are using AI in this presentation. I'm assuming everybody knew that as we've been going, because we mentioned it before. What you get with technical people, which I am one, we will tend to run hard into our comfort zones, which sometimes there's a lot of technical jargon in there, which if I start getting there, please stop me, ask questions. We're happy to peel back and make sure that everybody understands. We want to make sure that everybody's accountable as well. If we turn AI loose without any accountability, we'll get into that in a second, but everybody needs to have a human in the loop. We want to guard against bias, and you'll see some examples of that where different AIs will treat things a little bit differently depending on the data they were trained on. And then last, we want to do no harm. Never use AI to manipulate, mislead, or make any high impact decisions. So, data transparency. It can be very, very simple. If you're using AI in your business, I know as we were getting ramped up on site here, there's people talking about using chatbots and that kind of stuff in their business to answer some technical questions. That's a great use for AI. Now, the first thing that needs to happen is, hi, I'm the AI generated assistant. Or when the chat pops up, you know, assisted by AI. That way they know that they are interacting with a chatbot, because we want to make sure that the data that's being used, they know that it's going to be entered into the AI. And we want to make sure that they know that right now there's not a human in the loop. Any questions there? All right. We want to check for bias. So on the left, we have response from ChatGPT. On the right, we have a response from Anthropic's Claude AI. And what you'll see, the one on the left is making a lot of assumptions that it's a Western wedding. Weddings are Weddings are occurring traditionally in a house of worship, exchanging rings, a lot of the stuff that happens traditionally what we would see in a wedding in our area. However, on the right-hand side, you'll see they're listing out more about a Western Christian wedding. There's a lot less bias there, a lot more information too. But we want to make sure that as we're working with AI, we are recognizing when bias can occur. And we want to make sure that as we're making decisions that we are not using that bias in our decisions. It'd be the same as if we took a sample of people that all work within the same type of field. You take IT people, for example. If I grabbed one from Marquette, one from Grand Rapids, one from Detroit, one from middle of Michigan where we are, and one from northern Michigan, you'll see everybody's got a little bit different slant. Everybody has a preference for the products that they use to deliver the same general type of service. And they may start talking a little bit of smack about the products that the other people use because they have their own bias because of how it's worked for them in the past or what they've heard. And so we want to make sure we're avoiding that. For accountability, for those who do not geek out like I do for sci-fi and that kind of stuff, that Latin phrase there means who watches the watchers. So as you're looking at AI, without any human accountability, there can be damage done to your company, your brand, your customers, if you are not in the loop or whoever is using the AI product is not using it appropriately. We want to make sure that generative AI, which has come a long way and can impersonate humans to a point, is not treated the same as machine learning and robotic process automation. Now, those two are algorithms, they're software-based, and they're used to make decisions, but there's no human inflection, there's no decisions being made there aside from the stuff that it's been taught. And as Craig alluded to in our first session, we should really treat AI as infinite interns. It doesn't matter how many times you ask it something, it's going to return the data, it's going to return it quick, but is it really an expert in your field? Is it really something that can make decisions for you? No, we wouldn't trust an AI to hire somebody because we wouldn't trust an intern to hire somebody. We wouldn't trust an intern necessarily to make decisions on new product launches or decide that we're going to remove a product from our organization. So why would we just allow AI free reign to do that? So your organization always has to have somebody who the AI is accountable to and who is making sure that you guys are operating in an ethical manner. So do no harm. I am going to get up on a soapbox. I'm sitting right now, but we're going to assume it's a soapbox. Never use AI to manipulate. Never use AI to mislead. And again, keeping humans in the loop for high impact decisions. So when we're looking at impersonating humans, and these are deep fakes, right? So as we're going through, we attended a conference in October of last year for an industry event, and we went through, the CFO for that company was on stage. And he's been in YouTube videos. There's a ton of written articles about stuff he said out there. So there's a wealth of knowledge of what he says, how he says it, and literal recordings of his voice. And as he got up there, he goes, something I want to make sure that everybody in this room is understanding is that AI is both the best thing to happen and one of the scariest things to happen. And so he pulled out his phone. He goes, I do this at every event I speak at. And he pushed play. And it was his voice saying that, hey, I need you to pick up a bunch of gift cards. Now, they're a very sales-based organization. He goes, I need, $100 Amazon gift cards. They have hundreds of salespeople, engineers, and that kind of stuff. So for him to say, yeah, I need all these so we can provide that little extra on top of their bonuses and that kind of stuff, let them know we're thinking of them. And he pushed stop. He goes, how many of you thought that that was me? We all raised our hands, and he goes, that was AI generated, and I sat down and I generated that with AI 2 hours ago. He goes, would it fool my wife? Nope. But we've been married 20 years. Would it fool the new person that we hired to work as a financial analyst underneath me that I see once a week in the elevator and say hi to? More than likely. So in May of 2024, the company had transferred $25 million because they joined a meeting. The CFO was an AI, a video AI, and all the other people around the table were also video AIs, and they were tricked into transferring $25 million to Hong Kong. Yep. And they had the right person in the room. Now, how do we avoid that? We should have policies in place, like outside of AI policies, that say that any financial transaction that is going to occur has to have some sort of verification. They didn't have that. The person was empowered to make this decision. It sounded like, it looked like the person who was going to be making these decisions. And so they sent it along. So to that end, I have a slight example for you guys. Give me one chance to switch around.
In the fields, the bodies burning, as the war machine just keeps right on turning. Death and hatred, hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed, feeble little minds.
All right. So how many people know John Denver? We have a wealth of audio from John Denver, from his singing career, from interviews, everything. So it is very easy for people to take from that wealth of examples and make something like this. Now, I'll apologize real quick if anybody's offended by the choice. I tried to go for the least offensive example that I could. But you know, if anybody is not a Black Sabbath fan as well, I apologize. But the other piece that came out of the talk we were in is every day that goes by, this is the worst that this kind of AI is going to be. It's improving every day. All right, now back to the miserable dry stuff. So training AI, we want to train on safe data. So we want data that's been anonymized. We want to use data that matches closely what we use. So if we can make a false data set that trends regularly with along what we're doing, we can use that, generate new ways to use the AI properly, and then once we've secured it, tested it, we can reasonably start to use it going forward. Cost-effective, secure customization. Many AI tools will let you ground it. So we upload parameters around how the AI can interact with things. You can use the data, and to avoid the co-pilot problem of giving everything broad access. And so we want to use platforms and tools designed with small business protection out of the box. Ideally, most people here fall into that small to medium business category. And as much as everybody tries to keep on top of the latest and greatest, security, again, is that journey, and it's ever evolving. So we need to make sure that we are using stuff that's got protection in it out of the box. And then we want to make sure that we are always using software development lifecycle, which we start off and we test, we verify. If we have a failure, we loop back and we start again. We have that constant feedback loop before we start deploying things to the broader business. So next step, we go through, we set the foundation for an AI policy. We go through, what data can be shared, what tools we can use. We define what the access controls are and the review schedule of those controls. What required training and retraining, the ethical standards that we're going to use, and then the last piece, and one of the more important pieces, is in the event that there's an incident or an exposure, how do we report it, and where do we report it? As we start to go through and look at security as a whole, there needs to be in everybody's policies and procedures, and most people have it with HR, safety, and those kinds of things. When you start treating security, cybersecurity and AI the same way, how do you report? When do you report? Who do you report to? If you guys fall under any kind of regulatory compliance, are you required to report to them? As you've noticed, when you have cybersecurity breaches with hospitals and that kind of stuff, usually the announcement comes out sometimes days or months after it actually happens. And that is because they need time for the incident responders to get an idea of what's happened, how it's happened, and work to form a mitigation plan. So for the next piece, we have samples for you guys. So for anybody who's joined remote, on the left-hand side, we have our general do's and don'ts of using AI. And on the right-hand side is a sample AI policy for you guys to have. I'll give you guys a minute to get that downloaded, and then we can kind of run through them a little bit.
short order where
Right now.
Yeah. They're starting.
So for everybody, we're going to start over the do's and don'ts of AI. And we've talked about most of this throughout this presentation. Really, we want to make sure that our data is safe, anonymized. We use generic or template data. And in the event that we're going to use anything that's specific to our organization, we want to make sure that it's been explicitly approved by management. We never want to use personally identifiable information, confidential information, customer data, employee data, especially never passwords or security credentials, sensitive regulated data, data under legal hold or investigation, or anything that you don't want to share publicly. And then we have a quick self-check in the bottom left-hand corner. So does this data identify an individual? Would you share this data, and would it harm the company or its clients? Is it regulated or protected by law? And has the management, wow, tripping over my words today. Has management explicitly approved this for AI use? In the event you haven't, you need to talk with your data privacy officer. And then we've provided an example of an artificial intelligence policy. And you'll see at the top of every page of that, please consult with your HR representative or legal team before you implement this to make sure that it is fully in compliance with your local laws. Generally, this should be, but we want to make sure if there's anything that is industry specific for you guys, they'll be able to find it for you. So that kind of concludes the meat of the presentation. So as we look into sessions 3 and 4, they are going to be a lot more fun. They are going to show actual use of AI and how both we and you all can use that in your businesses and how to take things and automate them further. I'm going to leave this one up for everybody. These are the links for the different things that we've talked about in this organization, in this presentation. Even though the do's and don'ts has a QR code on it, the AI safeguards in the bottom left, and then the sample AI policy, it's right there if you guys get. Plus the different things that I've referenced as far as Copilot, the AI-assisted deepfakes, and some things around AI and regulated data. So that concludes our presentation. Does anybody have any questions, anything they'd like to talk about?
Are you aware of any LLMs that pass security clearances? You know, I know like in manufacturing, there's certain softwares that are employed for manufacturing control that store cloud data, but they have special security controls built in for parts that are aerospace or military and cannot be, you know, have to pass certain security clearance compliances.
And
is there an AI product that companies like that can use?
So we're talking more around like CMMC compliance
Well,
and
I mean,
ISO or?
exact compliance, because we don't actually get into that. I'm just thinking, you know, there's a lot of fields, you know, working for the state or working for other various government agencies. Are they able to utilize AI right now for any of that, or are they kind of locked out of it because of the security concerns?
It depends on how they use it and the guardrails that they put up inside of their own organization. So I know there's manufacturing company that we've talked to that has an arm that's outside of the country, and they are convinced that the arm that's outside of the country is sending them stuff that is run through AI first, because they're using some words and that kind of stuff that don't necessarily line up with normal day-to-day American speech. But they also don't have an AI policy in place saying they can't do it. But the further piece to answer your question, all of that needs to be factored in with the organization's exact needs and what they're allowed to use the AI for. And a lot of these, Mistral and some of the other ones that are out there, you can download those models and you can run them internally. So for those applications,
So if you have the processing power,
yep,
you can run your own internal AI.
Yep.
I'm thinking there's got to be a guy sitting at DARPA playing around with AI, but it's got to be obviously, you know, isolated from the rest of the internet.
Yep.
So.
And again, we're talking more along the lines of the generative AI, not specifically the machine learning and robotic processes. What you got?
So, are there any free or low-cost resources that we can use to start training ourselves on just AI safety?
Yep, absolutely. So one of the articles I linked, there is a 4-part series from the American Institute of Healthcare Compliance around AI. And they talk in some broad terms about using AI, especially in healthcare regulated spaces. There's a lot of data out there, and we can have the SEDP send this out on the platform we use, which is called HATS AI. They have a lot of really good data out there about the pitfalls of some of the models that are out there, and how to kind of train yourself up on general security. There are a lot of podcasts out there that are going across the entire industry, going over how to use AI. If you look at the ones geared more towards cybersecurity, they'll start talking more around in terms of policy and that kind of stuff that you guys would be looking for. Anybody else?
Can you send me a couple of links to those?
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, we will go ahead and shut this presentation down. If you guys, oh, we got one more. Yes.
So we have a company SharePoint page.
Mhm.
We do store files on our SharePoint page, but is that easily hackable, you're saying, or it's not, or we just shouldn't keep personal information on it?
So, try and speak in a little more generic terms. What industry are you guys in?
Trucking.
Okay. So, your company SharePoint page that's out there, do you have to authenticate to access it? Okay. Because I know there's some published SharePoint sites out there where anybody can get to the main landing page and there's some information sitting out there without authenticating. Okay. So as long as that is secured, you're using SSL encryption to access it, which is yours hosted on Microsoft 365 or is it an internal SharePoint? Okay. So that one would definitely have SSL encryption to encrypt the traffic between yourself and the site. I would caution you guys to make sure what you guys are putting on that SharePoint site and review that, make sure that the data that's on there meets whatever regulatory requirements and stuff that you guys have. And especially if you guys don't have it already, I would look at stuff around conditional access with Microsoft 365 to make sure that token theft is a really big thing that's happening. So you authenticate a session, And if you don't have the proper stuff set up with conditional access, if a bad actor has access to your machine, they can steal that token where you've authenticated and then use it in making any of the requests that they want. For anybody that's got any kind of general cybersecurity questions, we are happy to step in and consult with you guys, especially around Microsoft 365 and cloud. But for that, I would definitely make sure, pretty sure you guys have your own internal IT team? No, okay. I would reach out to you guys' Microsoft cloud service provider and start working through and asking them some questions around the access that's there for those pages. All right. And I don't see any other hands or anything, so I want to thank everybody for attending. If you have any problems or questions, anything you guys can think of, please reach out to the SEDP or myself and Craig. We'd be happy to answer those questions for you guys, and thank you.